Truth becomes dangerous the moment people confuse what they see with what is real. Welcome to another story in the series, From Wonder to Power, The Journey of Thought. Today I want to show you how Plato pushes philosophy beyond opinion and into a world that most people never even suspect exists. Athens is loud with claims. Everyone argues, everyone sees, everyone believes they know. Politics rewards appearance, persuasion, and speed. What looks convincing wins. What feels familiar passes for truth. Plato watches this and realizes something unsettling. If knowledge depends only on what the senses offer, then power will always belong to those who control appearances. So, he asks a quieter, more dangerous question. What if most people do not actually see reality at all? What if they live among reflections, mistaking shadows for substance, habit for knowledge, and consensus for truth? In that case, education is not about adding information, it is about turning the soul around. This episode opens where philosophy breaks with common sense, not to escape the world, but to judge it. Plato draws a line between what merely appears and what truly is. On one side stand images, opinions, and useful beliefs. On the other stand forms, structure, and intelligibility itself. Here, wonder hardens into order, and order begins to demand power. In a narrow Athenian workshop, Sophron bends over a pair of sandals returned by an unhappy customer. The leather has stretched. The stitching holds in some places and gives way in others. He has seen this before. No matter how careful he is, no pair ever comes out perfect. Each looks like a sandal, works like a sandal, and yet somehow misses the mark. Sophron accepts this as the nature of making things. Materials resist intention. Results stay close, but never exact, you see. Later that day, he stands in the shade of a courtyard and listens as Plato speaks. The question sounds simple at first. What makes all sandals sandals, despite their differences? People offer answers: shape, use, appearance. Plato keeps pressing. None of these explains why a poorly made sandal is recognized as poor. To judge failure, one must already know success. That standard, Plato suggests, does not come from any single object. It does not wear out or stretch. It stays the same. This is what he calls the form. The discussion sharpens when someone objects that only what can be touched is real. Plato draws a quiet but ruthless line. The visible world is a world of becoming. Things change, decay, mislead. Knowledge based on the senses shifts with light, angle, and mood. Above it lies another level: justice, beauty, equality. Not as human inventions, but as stable structures grasped by thought alone. They do not change. They judge everything that does. From this point on, the world looks different. Plato does not deny what people see. He lowers its authority. Appearance becomes secondary. Structure becomes primary. Philosophy turns away from what merely seems toward what must be true for seeming to work at all. Back in his workshop, Sophron repairs the sandals. They remain imperfect. But now he senses that each flawed object points beyond leather and thread. It participates in something he cannot touch but cannot dismiss. With this move, Plato quietly rearranges reality itself. What is seen becomes a reflection. What is understood becomes the ground. In a stone quarry outside Athens, Callistratos pauses during a brief rest. He spends his days underground, where the sun never reaches directly. Light arrives only as reflection, weak and scattered across the rock walls. Shadows slide over stone as men pass with baskets and tools. He rarely looks up. The shadows are enough. They tell him when to move, where others stand, when work resumes. He trusts them because they work. Later, in conversation, the quarry turns into something else. Plato asks him to imagine a man who has known nothing but this dim space since childhood. For such a man, shadows would not appear as copies. They would be reality itself. If someone were dragged upward into the open air, pain would come first. Eyes would burn. Confusion would follow. The familiar darkness would feel safer than the blinding light. Knowledge, Plato explains, does not begin with clarity. It begins with disturbance, I mean. Adimantus hears the danger in this image. If most people live among shadows, then ignorance is not a personal failure. It is a condition. Plato agrees. The senses offer what is useful for survival, not what is reliable for truth. Opinion thrives where light is partial and habit is strong. Knowledge requires assent. It pulls the soul away from comfort, routine, and immediate belief toward what explains appearances instead of copying them. The cave is not built by tyrants. It is where unexamined life naturally settles. Seen from a distance, the metaphor reshapes education itself. Learning is not filling an empty mind. It is turning the whole person toward something that resists them at first. Confusion and anger are not signs of failure. They mark movement. Those who return after seeing more clearly are often mocked or attacked, not because they are wrong, but because they unsettle what others depend on. Back in the quarry, the shadows remain the same, yet Callistratos notices them differently. The world has not changed. His relation to it has. In this image, Plato captures knowledge as assent, ignorance as comfort, and truth as light that reveals the limits of what once felt sufficient. Before sunrise, Glaucon stands on a hillside above Athens and watches the city come into view. Darkness loosens its grip slowly. Shapes sharpen, colors separate, distance becomes readable again. What was a single mass of shadow begins to reveal streets, roofs, movement. The change is gradual and slightly uncomfortable for the eyes. He remembers Plato's words from the night before. Truth does not arrive all at once. The soul must adjust to it, step by step, or retreat. Later, as they walk beyond the city walls, Plato explains the point more clearly. The soul is not empty, waiting to be filled. It already has the power to understand, but it is turned the wrong way. Most people face what is nearest and easiest: pleasure, reputation, opinion. Education, Plato insists, is not instruction, but reorientation. It is the slow art of turning the soul away from what merely appears toward what makes appearance possible. This turning is resisted because it demands leaving behind explanations that once felt enough, you see. As the path climbs, the city falls away behind them. Glaucon feels the strain in his legs and the tightening of breath. Plato does not ignore this. He uses it. Just as the body resists ascent, the soul resists truth. Habit clings. Familiar beliefs defend themselves. Illusion convinces more easily at first because it is comfortable. Truth requires endurance before it offers clarity. Seen from a distance, the ascent reveals its deeper meaning. It is not a single moment of revelation, but a process of realignment. The soul moves from opinion to understanding, from dependence on the senses to trust in reason, from images to principles. Nothing seen before is erased. It is placed within a wider order. When Glaucon turns back toward Athens, the city looks unchanged, yet it no longer feels absolute. Its noise and ambition now appear as reflections rather than foundations. The ascent has not removed him from the world. It has changed how the world holds its claim.
At the edge of the training ground, Adeimantus watches a group of young men argue about justice. Each speaks with confidence. Each raises his voice when challenged. No one listens. The discussion creates movement, but no direction. Adeimantus turns to Plato and asks why debate so often deepens division instead of understanding. Plato answers that most people argue like travelers in darkness, shouting instructions without knowing where they stand. He explains that the philosopher's role is not to command belief or impose doctrine. A guide does not drag another person uphill. He points, pauses, and sometimes holds them back. Those who rush fall. Those who are forced resist. To guide well, one must know the terrain of truth and the limits of the one who walks it. Timing matters. Patience matters. Showing too much too soon blinds rather than clarifies. Nearby, Simmias struggles with a mathematical proof. Plato does not solve it for him. He asks questions instead. Each question removes a false step or redirects attention. Slowly, something shifts. The solution appears not as information delivered, but as insight owned. Simmias realizes that Plato has not led him to the truth. He has prevented him from turning away from it. Guidance preserves freedom, while quietly blocking self-deception. Seen from above, this completes Plato's picture of philosophy. Ascent toward truth is possible, but never automatic. Left alone, most people cling to appearances or drift into empty abstraction. The philosopher stands between ignorance and understanding, not as ruler or prophet, but as mediator. Having seen further, he returns not to dominate, but to orient. His authority does not come from power, but from perspective. As the group disperses, some young men continue arguing. Others fall silent, thinking. Plato corrects neither. He knows guidance cannot guarantee assent. It can only make it possible. In this role, the philosopher becomes neither master nor savior, but a companion who knows the way upward and accepts the burden of walking beside others until they can see for themselves. By the end of this chapter, truth no longer feels like something simply discovered. It feels like something one must be turned toward, slowly, and at a cost. What Plato gains here is a new structure of reality. Knowledge is lifted out of opinion. Education becomes transformation, not instruction. The visible world keeps its place, but loses its authority. Appearances serve, they no longer rule. Philosophy claims a higher ground from which judgment becomes possible. Order emerges not through force, but through orientation. Power begins to shift away from persuasion and toward understanding. What is lost is innocence. Once the line between appearance and reality is drawn, there is no easy return. The world can no longer be taken at face value. Most people will remain among shadows, not because they choose deception, but because assent demands effort, patience, and discomfort. Truth becomes demanding. It separates those willing to endure disorientation from those who prefer familiarity well. This is the price of Plato's vision. Wonder hardens into structure. Structure begins to ask who should lead, who should guide, and who should follow. Philosophy steps closer to power, even as it claims to resist it. In the next chapter, Plato turns inward. If truth stands above the visible world, what draws the soul toward it in the first place? What force pulls humans upward against comfort and habit? To answer that, Plato introduces eros, not as desire for pleasure, but as longing for permanence, meaning, and immortality itself.